Speaking of reliability, a podcast with good friends talking with you about reliability engineering topics. Welcome to Speaking of Reliability. This is Fred Schenkelberg.
And this is Carl Carlson.
Hey, Carl. One of the things you brought up as an idea is around this idea of ethics and engineering ethics or reliability ethics. I think it's more of an engineering thing myself.
And yeah, could be professional ethics.
Professional ethics, but I think it applies other places too. And it was the first college class I ever took, by the way. I was a private in the Army, and I knew I wanted to go to school, and I had the opportunity with the local community college to take classes. I wasn't enrolled or in a big program or anything like that, but I thought, well, I got time, might as well. And the very first class was an ethics class, and it was about logic and code of conducts and things like that. It covered a pretty big realm. And I do remember, as a quick aside, is that in one of the classes, the unit I was assigned to, we happened to be out in the field, practicing, doing what we did. And I mentioned to my bosses I was missing the class that was the one before the midterm, so it was kind of like, I kind of hurt to miss that one. And he goes, oh, well, just take the Jeep and go to class. And I'm in fatigues and I have a rifle in my steel pot helmet and everything else. I'm driving the old fashioned Jeeps with the open top and all that stuff. And I drive in and park at the school parking lot, walk in with my rifle and take my helmet off, and got there in time for class. I'm just thinking, nowadays, I think that would be frowned on, to show up in a military vehicle carrying a military rifle and then walk into a school.
Yes, indeed. So the whole subject of safety has changed a lot. And I've been thinking about, because I've had some interaction with colleagues on the subject of the subject of ethics and reliability. And I go back, like you, I go back many years on this. And I'm thinking about product launches when I was at General Motors. What's the role of reliability when you're in product development? And I used to think that the role was to speak up and to balance the safety and customer and the projects and profit and all of those things. Try to balance them, but speak up from a reliability point of view and not be bashful.
Well, there was Seth Godin in his article this morning, was that there's this cultural thing that happens in organizations that it's okay to take a little bit off the edge all the time, go a little bit less than what's required, make it more mediocre. And it's not planned that way. It's just everybody is okay with just a little bit. And I think that happens in organizations. A car launch, if 50 people agree, then it's likely that it won't be quite as safe as it could be, or quite as, fancy as it could be, quite as good as it could be. With one or two people stand up, and this was in his article, I'm obviously summarizing, but if one or two people stand up and say, no, we need to talk about this, we need to sort this out, this is not acceptable, it is very unlikely that it would go to market, that with those identified flaws. It's just that social barrier to speaking up is insidious. And he didn't use that term, but I've been in places so many times where it's insidious. It's just, well, we don't talk about that. And, you don't understand, or whatever. And it's like, these are not easy conversations, and you take some brain power to rationalize why you're doing what you're doing. And it's easier to avoid it than to bring it up and talk about it.
There are company cultures that are very strong on the subject, and they could be strong in a good way or strong in a bad way. There are some company cultures that, and I'm thinking of my consulting career now because I interfaced with a lot of companies, and I'm not going to mention any names here, but there's some that where they value quality, reliability, safety extremely high.
Mm-hmm.
And the culture is all surrounded around that. And others value profit margin, bonuses, career advancement, things like that,
Yeah.
very high. And when I've had reliability groups and when I consult on reliability, I say, you have a mission that you're on. You're on a mission to improve safety, improve reliability, advocate for the customer. You're not on a mission to get along. Now, it's good to get along. It helps to get along. But if get along means you have to compromise any of those values, then I would rather you speak up, even if it upsets people. And I've had some hard conversations with people in some companies on that subject.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know I'm not shy. I never have been. Imagine that. And I was the only first level engineer on the staff for this new product platform being developed. So everybody else at the table was along with the program manager, which is like second or third only to the general manager, running a 50 engineer development team, and all of the associated other departments like marketing and finance and everything else were all like a mini company, mini startup kind of operation. He had his own P&L kind of setup. And I was the only first level engineer there. I didn't have a department or anything else. And I remember asking him, why am I here? I kind of feel uncomfortable with all these people that, have years more experience than I do and everything else. He says, because you ask the questions that nobody else is willing to ask. He says, you have the visibility across, you have to work as the reliability and quality voice here. You have to work across all these departments and know what's going on in them. So you need to be in this meeting. But the reason you are here is because you ask the questions that nobody else here wants to. And then, after he did that, I would ask a question, why are we doing this? We know this vendor is not any good. And 3 different people started squirming in their seats.
Oh my God. Yeah. Well, for sure, Fred, and what a great management that has those values. And I love to work with companies like that.
Yeah.
Now, what do you do? I'm going to be the devil's advocate here for a minute.
Oh, no, I want to be.
What do you do if you're working inside a company? I'm just thinking about all the people that listen to this podcast. If you're inside of a company that doesn't have those values necessarily, they don't allow that voice that speaks up, that goes against the grain. They value teamwork, which is usually good, but sometimes the individual in a team, not the majority, the individual is right. And so you have to have that confidence that it's okay to speak up. So what do you do if you're in a company that doesn't have that culture? So I'm just going to pause and think about that for a minute and see what you think as well, Fred.
Yeah.
What do we suggest people do?
Well, and it's not usually like, oh, just be quiet. It's all kinds of other pressures, and you get pulled aside and say, you're disrupting the meeting, or you're being a problem, or, that's not appropriate, or all of those kinds of comments and issues come at you.
Need you to be a team player.
Yeah. Yeah. And they, couch it as a free, it's like, right. I says, well, what is it that I'm not understanding is kind of the way I approached a lot of those things. There's something that just is not right. And maybe I don't know the whole picture. Is this already been discussed at some other meeting, or is this already settled, or is this, are you satisfied with the evidence that this is going to be okay? And I usually went at it and most of the times it's because I'm coming to it from a point of naivety, whatever. Not knowing all the facts, not knowing all the evidence. And it was one of those where it was, what am I missing? What's the big picture here? And some of those discussions were wholly unsatisfactory. they're very much saying, well, if we added more safety things to it, then the gross margin would be too low and we wouldn't make our bonus. And it kind of came down to that in some of these discussions. And they're like, well, that's wrong. and sometimes it came to a standstill right there. And I'm like, all right, well, I'm not supporting this project or whatever. And who else can I talk to that, really does care about it? And you have to choose those carefully because it's make or break career. Because if the entire chain of command is, yeah, that's what we do, well, then you got to leave the company. Yet I think the first step is just acknowledge that, maybe I'm not seeing it the way you are. What is it that makes you say that we should ignore this, obvious thing that's going to make the product explode and kill people? And it's not munitions.
Okay, so let me parse it out a little bit, Fred, because I think you're giving some very good advice here. First of all, you can talk in a meeting, and that has a very unique dynamics.
Yeah.
But then you said, this is a good idea. You can talk to people one-on-one. You can talk after the meeting on a break, and that opens up possibilities. You can talk to more than one person one-on-one.
Mm-hmm.
So there's ways you can do this. If you get to a point where they're moving ahead with something you feel personally with your expertise or your knowledge is unsafe or is the wrong course of action, at that point you have to do something. And that's the point I try when I used to have a reliability group over the years, I would coach them on that.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, here, I want you to stand up even if it's uncomfortable. Because frankly, a lot of reliability people tend to be on the introverted side.
Yep.
And so they're not used to speaking up when it's uncomfortable. And so I coach them that that's what I want you to do. You want to excel in my group to have the best impact. You have to take some risk to do that. Don't just take the safe route. And that's not easy to hear. And you got to be on good footing. And that's why I think you had a good suggestion, which is you can talk to people one-on-one in addition to in a group. You can do your own research, make sure you're on solid ground. But then once you've got some confidence that you're on the right ground, you have to speak up. You have to find a voice.
Well, on some issues, it should be obvious. And I know I was working with one team and I was doing a halt and they weren't big believers in halt. Of course, it breaks, you're overstressing it and stuff like that. And so we put this device on a vibration table, and I couldn't get any of the engineers to come with me, to do this stuff. Oh, we're too busy. We're trying to get this product out, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, all right, fine. So about 3-4 minutes into a relatively very low vibration is in that stage of the process, it stopped working, and we open it and there's this stream of smoke coming out of the product where it was, the burning phenolic in the morning kind of question, phrase. And you're like, well, that's not good. It's a battery operated thing, and it drained the battery straight into a dead short and smoldered a bunch of plastic. And I'm like, that could be worse, but luckily it's a small battery pack, not a lot of energy in it. And so I quickly grabbed my camera and took some pictures of it. And then we took it apart and found where the issue was. And that change went through lickety split. It was near impossible to get anything changed prior to that because they were very close to, or had just locked down the design to make the first round of prototypes. And they were, doing change control and all the other bureaucracy with that. And they were very loath to make even minor improvements at that point. And so I came back with a couple of photos and they said, oh, we need to change that. So being on good footing means do your homework, have evidence, and if they didn't even ask, will this happen to all the products? And they just said, oh, that's a totally unacceptable failure mode. We have to fix that, right? The issue I find is that we can wear the reliability hat way too much sometimes. And it's, well, if we move this component over here by 3 millimeters, we'll get an extra, we'll reduce its particular failure rate by half. And it's like from 1 fit to 2 fits to 1 fit. And it's 1,000 component product and that's not its primary failure mechanism. Yes, it would make it better. So what? It's
well, there's the trade-off, Fred. You've highlighted it there, which is you can have a trade-off in terms of there's a lot of abilities, in a huge group, and you have systems engineering, you have marketing, you have a lot of different players on a team, and you have to be able to look at things from the team point of view. So I'm certainly not advocating you only look at things from your own one point of view. And so you want to balance being a team player with, if you have a known safety-related high-risk problem, that's the one you have to advocate for. But a very low probability that's not safety, maybe it's an annoyance, things like that. You certainly don't want to go on the mat for that.
Yeah.
Because there are definitely trade-offs involved with any product. You'll never bring a product to market if you can't understand the different team points of view. And so you have to be able to work with the team. And here's where, don't want to just plug our book here, but Fred, you and I think have a couple of really good chapters in the Process of Reliability Engineering book. The last chapters that are soft skills, communication skills. Those are the ones you need in this kind of circumstance, because even if it's unpopular, you can find a way to communicate with people like you did with pulling somebody aside, that kind of thing, that gets your message across and is effective, even if it's unpopular.
Well, we chose the first skill to talk about in those chapters is listening, is foundational for all the other ones. And that's the hard part. It's not stand up and carry your banner and shout loud and everything else. And part of that due diligence is the engineering part. This chemical reaction will go to what do they call it? A rapid disassembly, a rapid thermal disassembly.
Yes.
I heard a lawyer tell me that once, and I'm like, what?
Oh, dear.
He said, we don't use that 4-letter word that starts with F. I said, okay, whatever. It's part of it is you got to do your engineering due diligence and homework. Part of that. But the biggest part of any change, of any proposal, of any desired outcome, of any influence, is you got to understand first. You got to understand what's the lay of the land, who's likely to be sympathetic to this, who's not, what are the arguments against it or not? Is this a false logic that's being applied, or is there a true trade-off that this makes sense or doesn't make sense? You only learn that by listening. All of the politics involved, all of the trade-offs and financials involved, all of that stuff.
Yes. We
got to listen.
I mean, it's in Stephen Covey's 7 Habits. So you have to listen and be aware of what the people are saying. Make sure you understand it before you speak up. And that is so important. You also have to be sure you're on solid ground. There's where you're doing your homework, that kind of thing, and practice communication skills. Because once you have a point to make and you've done your listening, then you need to make it in an effective way. So I think those chapters are really relevant to this discussion. But one of the points I want to make, Fred, on this is that once you've done that, you can't have your allegiance totally to money. And we've said you have to speak the language of money with management. You have to do that because we're in the business to make profit as companies, and understanding that. But you're also in the business of safety, and you're in the business of satisfying customers, and all those things should align. So if they get out of alignment and someone's pushing the money side of it ahead of safety, and you're confident of that, that's where you have to speak up, particularly in the position of reliability.
Yeah.
But I would say in any position.
Well, I think there's also part of the homework part, not the engineering side, but the money part is, even if we only have 2 of these failures and they both burn a house down, for example, that's not, and I used to call it's the 60 minutes close-up interview. You really don't want to be the person that has the close-up interview on 60 Minutes or any TV show, right? So why did you release this product that just burned this house down, kind of thing? And there's no good answers to any of those questions that you're getting. And it might only happen once. The damage to the brand is well documented. Here's the evidence. Here's the articles. Here's the case studies and stuff, is that, you can, work your way out of it, and there's better answers than other answers. Yet even that, inside the company, turning on a dime and scrapping everything, doing a total recall, and then redesigning it and getting it back out in a way that actually survives, the company survives, is also extremely expensive. And it says, do you want to be the disaster recovery guy because you just allowed that disaster to happen with forethought, with knowledge? Or do you want to make here's these steps that'll cost us $1,000 versus the $20 million lawsuit that you're going to be getting here if one or two of these fail? And I've gone with that, and I go in with finance people and insurance people and everything else. I come in guns blazing on those kinds of issues where it's obviously a safety issue, a big safety issue.
Yes, I totally agree. So knowing how to be a team player is important. And I think part of being a team player is knowing when to speak up when it goes against the grain of the team. You're not a team player just by everybody nodding their heads and sort of agreeing with you that something is what it is because the management says it is. You have to be willing to go against the management or against the overall team if you're on solid ground, but you do it in a way that's positive, in a way that's constructive, and using good communication skills.
Well, there's
nothing easy about this.
There's nothing easy about it. And you've heard about, you got to make sure you're in good, well established with your facts and information and practice your communication skills. I'm just thinking in the news recently, people that were in some organizations with known problems in manufacturing, known problems in design, finally going to whistleblower status, going outside the company to let folks know because nobody inside the company would listen to them. I think that's another barrier, is like, well, we really don't want to talk about that. And we're going to demote you. We're going to cut your pay. We're going to, do all these other things so that you get back in line. It can get ugly real quick.
Yes, it can. And I've teach people that I try to follow the chain of command, that type of thing. But I've taught my people that work for me when it's appropriate to go to a higher level.
Yep.
And you got to be on solid ground. You got to have good communication skills, but you also have to do it when it's appropriate.
Yeah.
And that's so not that easy to learn. So great subject. If you're a listener and you have a story to share, we would love to do part 2 of this podcast. In other words, get in touch with us because this is something I think Fred and I both feel very strongly about. So we'd love to hear from you on the subject.
Yeah, I'd also like to know, what kind of barriers do you see? And that might be worth just brainstorming a bunch of ideas to get around it. That would be, and also the success stories. And you can do that over at accendoreliability.com/go/SOR. And Carl and I and the other hosts of the show are available through LinkedIn and through our About pages. So there's plenty of ways to get in touch with us. We're not in your chain of command. You can tell us anything,
That's right.
We're open to that.
Well, very good. Great conversation, Fred.
All right. Thanks for bringing it up, Carl. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks for listening to Speaking of Reliability. We invite you to join the conversation. If you have a question or a topic that you think we should discuss in a future show, please let us know. You can find a comment box below the episode show notes, or just leave a note as part of a review on iTunes.